Hi, second grade. Welcome to day 4, lesson 28 of Yeh-Shen. This is your last reading lesson of second grade. How does that make you feel? I am rather sad about it. I don't know about you guys, but we'll try to make this one fun. All right, let's go ahead and get started. By the end of this lesson, you're going to be able to read and spell words with your vowel diphthongs, know the sequence of events in your stories, compare and contrast, read your high frequency words, and identify your vocabulary words. I'm going to show you all of these words, and I'm going to point to one, and you're going to tell me what it says. Word, want, good. Word, loved, good. Word, happened, good. Word, falling, good. Word, sorry, word, lived, word, above, word, while, word, enough. And your last word, should. All right, here's our vocabulary words. Last time through these: task, glimmering, served, content, warn, overjoyed, concealed, and valuable. Task is a small job to do. Warn, having the look of being used over and over again. Content means satisfied. Glimmering means sharp, shining and sparkling. Served, carried in and placed before people. Concealed, hidden, out of sight. Overjoyed means very happy. Valuable means worth a lot of money. All right, if there's any of these vocabulary words you are struggling with, please take some time to study them. All right, remember this week and last week we've been talking about sequence of events, which is the order in which things happen. We've also been talking about comparing and contrasting. We're going to get more into comparing and contrasting today. So my sequence of events, we're going to sum up Yeh-Shen real quick before we read it for the last time. So first, Yeh-Shen spends all day doing chores, and her stepmother and sister are mean. Next, she visits a friend that's a fish. Jin doesn't like that and cooks the fish for dinner. Third, Yeh-Shen's sad. She's approached by an old man who tells her to put the fish's bones in 4 pots by her bed. Fourth, Yeh-Shen wants to go to the spring festival, so she makes 3 wishes, and her wishes are granted, so she goes to the festival. Fifth, Yeh-Shen hurries home so she isn't caught by her stepmother, and on the way she loses her silk slipper. And last, Yeh-Shen hears that the king's looking for the owner of the silk slipper, so she sneaks out one night, meets the king. They fall in love and live happily ever after. And her stepmother and stepsister are not allowed to live at the castle or visit, and they have to live in their cave the rest of their lives. So now that I've summed it up for you, let's go ahead and read it one more time. Now remember, as you read, think of the sequence of events, and also think about the message the story is really trying to tell us. Yeh-Shen was a girl who grew up in China a long, long time ago. Her mother and father had died, so she lived with her mean stepmother Jin and her stepsister Junli. They lived in a cave. Every time Jin looked at Yeh-Shen, she became angry. Yeh-Shen was gentler and kinder than Jin's own daughter Junli. Yeh-Shen was also a hard worker. Junli was spoiled and lazy. Jin gave Yeh-Shen only rags to wear. She gave her a long list of chores to do. When Yeh-Shen finished one task, Jin added 3 more to her list. Yeh-Shen was always busy working. She did not have any chance to make many friends, but she did have one very special friend. This friend had golden eyes, glimmering scales, and a big, beautiful tail. It was a fish. It was the fish that lived in a pond. Every day, Yeh-Shen stopped by the pond and shared some crumbs with the fish. Every day, the fish popped up to greet its friend. Yeh-Shen's stepmother saw this and became furious. She didn't want Yeh-Shen to have any friends, not even a fish. One day, Jin caught the fish and cooked it for dinner. That's not very nice. Yeh-Shen cried when she saw her friends serve for dinner. She ran out of the cave and sat by the pond. "What's the matter?" an old man asked her. Yeh-Shen told him about her friend, the fish. Then she told him what her stepmother had done. "Listen carefully to me," the old man said. "The bones of that fish hold special powers. Take the bones and bury them in 4 pots. Put 1 pot at each corner of your bed. Whenever you need help, tell the bones what you need. They will make your every wish come true." Yeh-Shen followed the old man's directions. When she got back to the cave, she buried the bones in 4 pots. Then she put the pots by the corners of her bed. She did not have anything to ask for yet, but she felt content knowing that her friend was close by. A few weeks later, the spring festival arrived. At the festival, young men and women could meet. They hoped to fall in love and marry. Jin didn't want to ruin Junli's chances of finding a husband, so she ordered Yeh-Shen to stay home and clean. Then she and Junli went to the festival. Yeh-Shen did not want to stay home and clean. For the first time since she buried the bones, she had a wish. "I wish I had beautiful clothes," she said to the bones. "I wish I could go to the festival. I wish I could be like all the other girls." As soon as Yeh-Shen said the words, something amazing happened. She was covered in the finest clothes from head to toe. Her old worn shoes were replaced by a pair of slippers made from silk. Yeh-Shen was overjoyed and grateful for the gifts from her friend. She ran off happily to the festival. Everyone at the festival stopped to stare at Yeh-Shen when she walked in. Who was this beautiful girl in these magnificent clothes? Yeh-Shen had a wonderful time at the festival, but she was worried that her stepmother would notice her. She decided to hurry home, but she ran so fast that one of her silk slippers fell off. It lay in the middle of the road. It was the only sign that Yeh-Shen had visited the festival. At home, Yeh-Shen stuffed her new clothes into the pots. She concealed her 1 silk slipper, too. She changed into her rags and waited for her stepmother to return. Meanwhile, a traveler found a silk slipper on the road. He knew it was valuable, so he gave it to the king. The king was curious to find the owner of the slipper, so he had his men build a hut. Anyone could come to this hut to try on the silk slipper. Yeh-Shen heard about the hut. She wanted her slipper back, so she sneaked out of the cave one night and ran quietly to the hut. As she crept toward the slipper, the king's men grabbed her. The king took one look at Yeh-Shen's rags and thought she was a thief. Yeh-Shen looked up at the king. Her eyes were filled with tears. The king saw how gentle and kind she was. He listened to her words. "Please, I will show you the other slipper," Yeh-Shen whispered to the king. Yeh-Shen led the king to her home. She put on the matching silk slipper and her fine clothes. The king knew then that he wanted to marry her. However, he was angry at how Jin and Junli had treated Yeh-Shen. He told them never to come to his castle, so they stayed in their cave for the rest of their lives. All right, nice job. Really like that story. What is the message? What's the moral of the story the author wants us to get from that story? Do you remember? We talked about it a little last week. Yeah, treat others the way you want to be treated, right? Jin and Junli were not nice to Yeh-Shen, and in the end, they were punished for it and had to stay in the cave the rest of their lives. Now, Yeh-Shen was always kind to everyone, and she ended up living happily ever after. So I would say what the author wanted us to learn was to treat others the way you want to be treated. All right, I have a few comprehension questions for you. First one is, how does Yeh-Shen respond to not being able to make friends? Her stepmom would not let her make friends. How did Yeh-Shen respond? Yeah, she became friends with a beautiful fish. Good. How does Yeh-Shen feel when she first finds out about her stepmother cooking the fish? How did Yeh-Shen feel? She is very sad and unhappy, huh? How would you feel if your stepmother or someone in your life hurt something that you really cared about? Yeah, you'd probably be very unhappy and sad too. Good. How does Yeh-Shen feel after she buries the bones of the fish? Yeah, she feels much better with her friend close by. And last, what does Yeh-Shen do right after she returns home from the festival? Yeah, she hides her fine clothes. Where does she hide her fine clothes? Yeah, she hides them in the pots. Why do you think she put them in the pots? Yeah, Yeh-Shen's afraid that her stepmother would find them if she didn't hide them. And we talked about the moral of the story is good things happen when you are kind, right? All right. This week for our story that goes along with this one, it's Cinderella. We're talking about fairy tales this week, and a fairy tale, remember, is a make-believe story that has been told for many, many years. So Cinderella has been told for many, many years, and there's many, many different versions of Cinderella out there. And then as we read Cinderella, we're going to read Cinderella right now. I want you to pay attention to the illustrations. The illustrations are drawings that are shown that show important details to help us understand more about our character, setting, and plot in our story. So I'm going to read you Cinderella, and I want you to pay special attention to these illustrations as I read. Cinderella. This is a version by Sheila Higginson and illustrated by Donald Wu. Once upon a time there lived a girl named Cinderella. Cinderella was smart, kind, and beautiful. Her father loved her very much, and she loved him. Cinderella had a stepmother and two stepsisters too. They did not love Cinderella. They were jealous of her and were never kind. Cinderella had to do all of the chores. She mopped the floors and washed all of the dirty dishes. She dusted, scrubbed, and polished every single thing in the house. One day, Cinderella's family received an invitation to a ball. The prince was having a dance and inviting all of the young women in the kingdom. Cinderella ironed her stepsisters' dresses. She brushed their hair and fixed their bows. Then she waved goodbye as they skipped off to the ball. Cinderella was not allowed to go. After everyone left the house, Cinderella sat alone by the fireplace and cried. Tears streamed down her beautiful face. Oh, how I wish that I could go to the ball, Cinderella sobbed. I wish that I had a beautiful dress to wear. Let's pause over here on this page. What were the words at the beginning of the story? Look up here. Once upon a time. Where do we usually see once upon a time? Yeah, we usually see once upon a time in fairy tales. So when you come across a story that says once upon a time, usually that means you're going to read a fairy tale. And then let's look over here on this page. Look at these illustrations. What details do you notice about the characters shown that helps us learn more about them? So here's an illustration of Cinderella, and here's an illustration of her mom and stepsisters. What do these show? Well, this picture here on page 470 shows that Cinderella's clothes look very worn out and she's cleaning, right? If we look over here, Cinderella's stepmother and stepsisters are dressed in fancy clothes and they have fancy hairstyles too. All right, let's continue on. Just then, a tiny woman with wings flew through the window. She had a wand in her hand. It was Cinderella's fairy godmother. What are you crying? Why are you crying, my dear? The fairy godmother asked Cinderella. I want to go to the ball too, cried Cinderella. Then you shall go, said the fairy godmother. Cinderella's fairy godmother waved her wand quickly in the air. Poof! A pumpkin transformed into a golden coach. 6 mice turned into a team of horses to pull the coach. Whoosh! Cinderella's old worn-out clothes were changed into a beautiful pink and silver gown and 2 glass slippers. What are you waiting for? The fairy godmother asked. Cinderella, you need to get to this ball. Just make sure that you come home by midnight. The prince saw Cinderella as soon as she entered the ballroom. He could not believe his eyes. She was the most beautiful girl he had ever seen. The prince asked Cinderella to dance. The prince soon discovered that Cinderella was smart and kind, and he fell completely in love with her. Cinderella learned that the prince was good and noble. Cinderella learned that the prince was good and noble. Cinderella fell in love with him too. Let's pause here. I have a question for you. Why is this night such a special treat for Cinderella? Yeah, Cinderella doesn't usually get to go to special places because of her evil stepmom and stepsisters. So she got to ride in a golden coach and wear a fancy ball gown and dance with the prince. Soon enough, the clock began to strike midnight in the ballroom. Cinderella gasped and turned to race out of the castle. As she ran out, one of her glass slippers fell off her foot. Cinderella did not stop to get it. The prince rushed after Cinderella, but he couldn't catch her. He picked up the glass slipper and sighed. It belonged on the foot of the girl he loved. He vowed to find Cinderella and marry her. Why are Cinderella and the prince both in a hurry here on this page 474? Cinderella rushes away because she hears the clock strike midnight, and her fairy godmother told her to be home by midnight, right? And the prince is in a hurry because he's rushing after Cinderella because he's fallen in love with her. All right, we're almost done. The prince was true to his word. With the glass slipper in hand, he knocked on every door in the kingdom. He was looking for the girl whose foot would fit into the slipper. Every girl wished the slipper would fit, especially Cinderella's stepsisters. The stepsisters tugged and pulled on the slipper. They pushed with all their might, but they could not fit their big feet into the slipper. Cinderella watched her stepsisters as she stood next to the fireplace. At last she stepped out so the prince could see her. "May I try?" she asked shyly. Why does each stepsister try to fit the slipper on their big feet, like they're doing here? Yeah, the prince will marry the person whose foot fits perfectly in the slipper. And the stepsisters all want to marry the prince, so they're trying to get the shoe to fit. The prince knelt down in front of Cinderella and held out the glass slipper. Cinderella placed her foot into the slipper, and it fit her perfectly. However, the prince did not need to see that. He looked into Cinderella's eyes. He knew that she was his true love. The prince took Cinderella back to his castle, and they were married the next day. Then Cinderella, who was always kind, invited her father, her stepmother, and her stepsisters, to live in the castle, to live with the prince and her in the castle. They all lived happily ever after. What lessons can we learn from this version of Cinderella? Think about it. Yeah, people who are good and kind will always be rewarded, or treat others the way you want to be treated, right? Or always be kind to people, just like in Yeh-Shen. Now, let's talk about comparing and contrasting. Remember, comparing means to tell how the things are the same, and contrasting means to tell how things are different. So we use this diagram called a Venn diagram, V-E-N-N, Venn diagram, to compare and contrast things. So this is about Yeh-Shen. We're going to compare and contrast Yeh-Shen and Cinderella. So this is Yeh-Shen, this side is Cinderella, and this here in the middle where these circles overlap is how these stories are the same. So these two sides are how they're different, and in the middle it tells us how they are similar. So I went ahead and filled this in, but we might be able to add a few things to it. So in Yeh-Shen lives in a cave, and in Cinderella, she lives in a house, right? Yeh-Shen has a friend that's a fish, and in Cinderella, she has friends that are mice. Remember, they pulled her pumpkin coach? In Yeh-Shen, the old man is the fairy godmother, and in Cinderella, she has an actual fairy godmother that's a fairy, right? In Yeh-Shen, she goes to the spring festival. In Cinderella, she goes to a ball. In Yeh-Shen, she loses a silk slipper, and in Cinderella, she loses a glass slipper. Now let's see how these stories are the same. They both have mean stepmothers and stepsisters. They have some form of a fairy godmother. This one is an old man, and this is an actual fairy godmother. They both, Yeh-Shen and Cinderella, lose a shoe, and they both end up marrying the king or prince in the story. Now, can you think of anything else that you would want to compare and contrast about these stories that I missed? Looking at the illustrations here on Cinderella's page, and she has brown hair. In the original story, what color hair does Cinderella have? Like the Disney movies. Yeah, she's usually blonde. That's different than it usually is. How about the ending of her story? Yeh-Shen's stepmother and stepsisters lived in a cave the rest of their lives. But in this Cinderella we just read, she invites her family to live with them in the palace. That was very kind of her, wasn't it? Anything else different? All right, so remember, this is comparing and contrasting. This is a Venn diagram, and comparing means telling how things are the same, and contrasting means telling how things are different. All right, quickly, let's review our phonics, and then I'll let you go. So, vowel diphthongs this week and last week, they say ow. Read these words as I point to them. Word, about, good. Word, proud, good. A word, allow, good. Word, ouch, good. Word, cow, good. And last word on this page, clown. Just as I'm looking here, remember, OU can be found at the beginning and middle, and OW is usually found in the middle and at the end. All right, let's practice and review words with the ah sound. Word, yawn. Word, paw. Word, crawl. Word, claw. Word, drawn. Word, straw. Good. Now we're going to practice words with the sound, spelled O-O. Word, stood. Word, brook. Word, ooh, that's a hard one. Neighborhood. Word, cookbook. Word, hook. And last word, compound word, overlook. Good. Now let's move on to the words with the oo sound. Word, spoon. Good. Word, scoop. Good. Word, balloon. Good. Word, bloom. Good. Word, to. And last word, soon. Good. Go ahead and read What a Surprise with me. There are many things to see when you step outside. Some things you see when you go out may not surprise you. Some things you see when you go out may surprise you. A surprise happens when you see something that you don't expect to see. A sky filled with stars might not surprise you. You know that on a clear night the sky is filled with stars. What if you saw something long and bright shoot across the sky? Would that surprise you? Wow, you might shout. It looks like a shooting star. What is it? Rain falling to the ground might not surprise you. You know that rainwater falls from clouds. Now, what if you saw water spouting up out of the ground? Would that surprise you at all? Wow, you might shout. Look at that. I want to see that again. There are things you expect to see after a snowstorm. You might see mounds of snow or a snowplow. What would you think if you saw this bear? Would it surprise you? Wow, you might shout. How did that round snow bear get there? There are things you expect to see at the beach. You might see umbrellas. You might see crowds of children playing. What if you saw a hippo like this? Would it surprise you? Wow, you might shout. It took pounds of sand to make that. Flowers growing in a park might not surprise you, but what if you saw a flower growing in a stone wall? Would that surprise you? Wow, you might shout. How can a flower grow in that wall? Seeing one balloon flying might not surprise you, but what if you saw a sky filled with many balloons? Would that surprise you? Wow, you might shout. I see more balloons than I can count. Seeing a rainbow after a rainstorm is a nice surprise. Would seeing two rainbows amaze you? Wow, you might shout. I have never seen anything like that in my whole life. While you are outside, look up and down, look all around. Which things surprise you? All right, let's say the word, spell the word, say the word. Now, as you spell the word, I want you to take your finger, get your finger ready, and write the letters in the air. First word is cow. C-O-W, cow. Your next word is house. H-O-U-S-E, house. Your next word is town, T-O-W-N, town. Shout, S-H-O-U-T, shout. Down, D-O-W-N, down. Mouse, M-O-U-S-E, mouse. Found, F-O-U-N-D, found. Loud, L-O-U-D, loud. Brown, we're almost done. B-R-O-W-N, brown. Ground, G-R-O-U-N-D, ground. Pound, P-O-U-N-D, pound. And last word is flower, F-L-O-W-E-R, flower. All right, you know what your exit ticket is. Go ahead and read What a Surprise. Now, if you really want to challenge yourself, go ahead and use the chart that's attached to your email, or go ahead and make one on your own and do an OU column, an OW column, an OO column, and an AW column, and sort the words as you read that you find in the story. Thank you, second graders. I have had a blast working with you on these videos the past couple months. I know it's not the same as when we're in school, but I hope you have learned something, and I will see you soon.